Fate has no mercy.
A Viking prince betrayed by his own family returns for a deadly revenge. Eola the Northman 2022 delivers epic battles, ancient legends, and shocking secrets. Watch Califax for the full movie review and hidden facts behind this powerful Viking tale. The Northman is a 2022 American epic historical fantasy action movie directed by Robert Eggers, who also wrote the screenplay with Sean. The story is based on the old legend of Amleth from Gesta Danorum, written by Saxo Grammaticus. The movie follows Amleth, a Viking prince who is forced into exile after his uncle brutally murders his father. Years later, during the height of the Viking Age, Amleth begins a dangerous journey to get revenge and take back what was stolen from him. The movie features a powerful cast, including Alexander Skarsgård as Amleth, Nicole Kidman, Claes Bang, Anya Taylor-Joy, Gustav Lind, Ethan Hawke, Björk, and Willem Dafoe. Each character brings a unique presence to this dark Viking world filled with battles, betrayal, and ancient beliefs. Robert Eggers and Alexander Skarsgård had talked about working together on a project before The Northman was made. Skarsgård had been interested in creating a Viking movie for many years, and after meeting with Eggers, they decided this would become Eggers' third major film project. The rest of the cast joined the movie in 2019, and filming took place from August to December 2020 in different locations across Iceland, the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland. The movie takes heavy inspiration from Norse mythology, bringing old Viking legends, rituals, and beliefs to life with a dark and realistic style. The film shows a brutal world of warriors, kings, and revenge, while also exploring themes of family, destiny, honor, and sacrifice. The Northman had its premiere at the TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles on April 18, 2022. Before that, it was already released in some European and South American countries starting on April 13. The movie officially arrived in theaters across the United States on April 22, 2022. The film received a lot of praise from critics, especially for its amazing visuals, intense action scenes, powerful performances, and Robert Eggers' unique direction. However, Despite the positive reviews, the movie did not perform as strongly as expected at the box office. It earned around 69.75 million worldwide against a production budget of about $70 million. Later, the Northman found more success through digital rentals, streaming platforms, and home media releases. This helped the movie recover a large part of its financial losses and allowed more audiences to discover its epic Viking story. In AD 895, King Orvandil War-Raven Ethan Hawke returns to his homeland, the island of Raffensee in the North Atlantic, after years of fighting and conquering lands overseas. He reunites with his wife, Queen Gudrún, Nicole Kidman, and his young son and heir, Prince Amleth, Alexander Skarsgård. Orvandil deeply loves his son and wants to prepare him for the day he becomes king. To get Amleth ready for his future as ruler, Orvandil takes him through a special spiritual ceremony led by his jester Hymir Willem Dafoe. During the ritual, Orvandil makes Amleth promise that if anyone ever attacks and kills him, Amleth must take revenge. By touching his father's blood, Amleth experiences a vision of the great tree of kings, connecting him to his royal bloodline and destiny. But the next morning, everything changes. Orvandil's half brother Fjölnir, Claes Bang, betrays him and murders the king. Fjölnir attacks the royal fortress, takes control of the kingdom, and captures Queen Gudrun. He sends his warrior Finner, Elder Scar, to kill young Amleth, but Amleth fights back, cuts off Finner's nose, and escapes on a boat. Before leaving, Amleth swears that he will return one day and get revenge. Finner later tells Fjolnir that Amleth is dead and buried at sea. Many years later, Amleth has grown into a fierce warrior and lives as a berserker with a group of Vikings in the land of Rose. These warriors believe they are connected to wolves and fight with extreme brutality and rage. After one violent raid in Gardariki, where some Vikings commit horrible acts against innocent villagers, Amleth visits a temple dedicated to the god Svetovit. There, he meets a mysterious seeress, Björk, who reveals that his destiny is still connected to Fjolnir. The seeress tells Amleth that he will eventually find Fjolnir on a distant island where they will face each other near a burning lake. She also tells him that he must find a magical sword that will help him defeat his enemy. She reveals that his fate is connected to a future Maiden King. Amleth discovers that Fjolnir lost his kingdom after being defeated by King Harald of Norway and now lives as an exile in Iceland. Fjolnir survives by running a farm and receives slaves from Harald every year to work the land and pay his taxes. Throughout his journey, ravens guide Amleth, and he believes these birds carry the spirits of his dead father and ancestors, helping him complete his mission of revenge. Amleth disguises himself as a slave and secretly joins a ship traveling to Iceland, where Fjolnir now lives. During the journey, he meets Olga, Anya Taylor-Joy, a Slavic woman who claims to have magical powers and calls herself a sorceress from the birch forest. When they arrive in Iceland, Amleth and Olga are taken to Fjölnir's farm. There, Amleth discovers that his mother, Gudrún, has married Fjölnir and has a new son named Gunnar Elliot Rose. He also meets Thorir the Proud, Gustav Lind, Fjölnir's older son and Amleth's cousin. Amleth hides his true identity and begins working on the farm while secretly watching Fjölnir and searching for the perfect moment to strike. During this time, he even enters Fjölnir's home and sees that his mother appears to be living a peaceful life. One night, Amleth meets a mysterious magician who helps him communicate with the spirit of Hymir. Amleth learns that Hymir was murdered by Fjölnir many years ago. The spirit tells him about a legendary magical sword called Droger, a powerful blade that can only be removed from its sheath at night. The sword is hidden at the gates of Hell. Amleth enters an ancient burial mound to find the sword. Inside, he battles the undead mound dweller Ian White. Amleth discovers that the creature cannot be defeated in darkness. So he pulls him into the moonlight and finally kills him. After winning the battle, Amleth takes the magical sword and secretly hides it when he returns to the farm. The next day, Amleth is chosen to compete in a violent Viking ball game called Natliker against another farm. The match quickly becomes dangerous, and Gunnar joins the game to help his team. When Gunnar is almost killed, Amleth saves him. Because of this act, Thorir rewards Amleth by making him an overseer and allowing him to choose a woman as a prize. During the celebrations that night, Amleth and Olga become closer and share a passionate moment. They promise each other that they will work together to destroy Fjölnir. Amleth begins attacking Fjölnir's men, while Olga secretly poisons their food with fly agaric, a powerful hallucinogenic mushroom. The chaos spreads across the farm, and many people believe the Christian slaves are responsible for the attacks. Using the confusion, Amleth enters Fjölnir's home and finally confronts his mother. But Gudrún reveals a shocking truth. She tells Amleth that she was originally taken as a slave and that Amleth was born because of violence, not love. She admits that she wanted both Orvandil and Amleth gone and even tries to manipulate him. Furious and heartbroken, Amleth rejects her and later kills Thorir, taking his heart as proof of his revenge. Gudrun then reveals Amleth's true identity to Fjölnir and demands that he kill him. Fjölnir threatens to kill Olga, but Amleth offers a deal: Olga's life in exchange for Thorir's heart. After being brutally beaten and captured, Amleth is eventually freed when a group of ravens arrives, which he believes represents the spirits of his father and ancestors. Olga finds Amleth and helps him escape from the farm by boat. During their journey, Amleth has a vision and discovers that Olga is pregnant with twins. He realizes that one of their children could become the maiden king mentioned by the series. However, Amleth fears his children will never be safe while Fjölnir is alive, so he decides to return and finish his revenge. Even though Olga begs him not to leave, Amleth returns to the farm, frees the slaves, and kills many of Fjölnir's warriors. While searching for Fjölnir, Amleth is attacked by his own mother. With his magical sword Draugr, he kills her. Then Gunnar attacks Amleth and stabs him multiple times from behind. But Amleth manages to defeat him as well. When Fjölnir finds his wife and son dead, he realizes Amleth is responsible. He challenges Amleth to a final battle at the gates of hell, located near the Hekla volcano. The two warriors meet there and fight in an intense sword battle. After a brutal struggle, Amleth defeats Fjölnir and cuts off his head, completing his revenge. However, Amleth is badly injured and knows he is dying. As he takes his final moments, he sees a vision of Olga holding their twin children and protecting their future. Soon after, a Valkyrie appears and carries Amleth's spirit through the gates of Valhalla, where he finds peace after completing his destiny. Casting Alexander Skarsgård as Amleth, Alexander Skarsgård occupies the central position in the casting of the Northman, embodying the adult Amleth, the Viking prince whose life is defined by a childhood oath of vengeance. The role demanded an actor capable of conveying both primal physical power and a simmering, almost ritualistic intensity. Skarsgård's background proved decisive. His Swedish heritage and prior experience playing the Viking vampire Eric Northman across multiple seasons of True Blood gave him an intuitive grasp of Norse inflected physicality and mythic presence. Beyond that series, his work in Big Little Lies, The Legend of Tarzan, Melancholia, Passing, and Godzilla vs. Kong demonstrated range across drama, physical action, and more stylized performances. The project itself originated in part from Skarsgård's long-held desire to make a Viking film. He had been developing the idea for years before meeting Robert Eggers. Their conversation shifted from an unrelated potential collaboration to the Viking material, and Eggers ultimately decided to make the film his third feature after that meeting. Skarsgård served not only as the lead but also as a producer, which allowed him deeper involvement in shaping the production's authenticity and scale. Physical preparation was extensive. He gained significant muscle mass, trained rigorously with stunt coordinators, and endured the harsh outdoor conditions of the shoot, including mud, cold, and remote locations. The character's arc required him to portray a boy who becomes a berserker warrior and later a calculating infiltrator posing as a slave. Young Amleth was played by Oscar Novak, creating a clear visual and emotional through line from childhood trauma to adult obsession. Novak had previously appeared as young Bruce Wayne in The Batman and in Poldark, bringing a natural intensity suitable for the early sequences of paternal bonding and sudden violence. Skarsgård's performance anchors the film's tone. The casting choice ensured that the protagonist would feel both larger than life and grounded in specific cultural and historical detail, avoiding generic action hero tropes in favor of a figure shaped by ritual, fate, and blood debt. Nicole Kidman as Queen Gudrún. Nicole Kidman was cast as Queen Gudrún, Amlet's mother, a role that required an actress of substantial dramatic stature capable of shifting between regal authority, vulnerability, and unexpected complexity. Eggers and Skarsgård both regarded her as the ideal choice for the part. After the script was developed, they approached her. Eggers met her in person, and she committed quickly. The character occupies a pivotal position in the narrative, wife of the slain king, captive who becomes wife to the usurper, and mother whose allegiances and desires prove more layered than the hero initially understands. Kidman's extensive filmography provided the necessary range. Her work in Big Little Lies, where she had previously shared the screen with Skarsgård, being the Ricardos, The Undoing, Moulin Rouge, Eyes Wide Shut, the others, and numerous other projects demonstrated her ability to inhabit complex women under pressure. In The Northman, Gudrún is not a passive figure. The casting of a major star in this role elevated the character's psychological weight and ensured that the maternal relationship would carry significant dramatic force rather than remaining a simple plot device of rescue. Her presence also balanced the predominantly male, physically imposing ensemble, bringing a different register of intensity rooted in emotional and political calculation. Claes Bang as Fjölnir, the brotherless Claes Bang was selected to play Fjölnir the brotherless, the uncle who murders King Orvandil and seizes both the throne and Gudrun. The role called for an actor who could embody both ruthless ambition and a certain tragic dimension as the character's fortunes decline. Bang, a Danish actor known for The Square, The Girl in the Spider's Web, and The Affair, brought a European sensibility and a commanding physical presence suited to the Viking setting. His casting helped maintain cultural and linguistic authenticity within the Scandinavian influenced world of the film. Fjölnir is not a cartoonish villain. The performance needed to convey the logic of a warrior culture in which power is taken by force and held through strength and lineage. Bang's work allowed the character to function as a mirror and foil to Amleth, both men shaped by the same codes of honor, violence, and fate. Ethan Hawke as King Orvandil War Raven. Ethan Hawke plays King Orvandil War Raven, Amleth's father, whose early death sets the entire plot in motion. Although the role is relatively limited in screen time, it is foundational. Hawke's casting brought established dramatic credibility and the ability to convey both paternal warmth and the ritualistic, almost shamanic aspects of kingship in the film's opening sequences. The initiation rite involving Hawke and Willem Dafoe's Hymir required actors comfortable with physical and emotional vulnerability, including animalistic behavior. Hawke's filmography, spanning independent drama, mainstream work, and collaborations with directors who demand intensity, made him a natural fit. His presence establishes the world of the film as one of genuine emotional stakes rather than pure spectacle, and the chemistry with young Oscar Novak as Amleth grounds the father son bond that drives the revenge narrative. Anya Taylor-Joy as Olga of the Birch Forest. Anya Taylor-Joy was cast as Olga of the Birch Forest, the Slavic sorceress and enslaved woman who becomes Amlet's ally and romantic partner. The role was written with her in mind. Eggers and Taylor-Joy had previously collaborated on The Witch, where she played the central young woman confronting supernatural and social forces. Their established working relationship allowed for a performance built on mutual trust and a willingness to explore intense, unconventional territory. Taylor-Joy's distinctive screen presence, marked by striking features, controlled intensity, and an ability to convey both vulnerability and steel, suited a character who claims cunning and magical knowledge while navigating survival among captors. The casting reinforced thematic continuity across Eggers' films. Olga is neither pure love interest nor simple sidekick. She possesses agency, knowledge of herbs and ritual, and her own reasons for aligning with Amleth. Taylor-Joy's rising profile after The Queen's Gambit, Split Glass, and Last Night in Soho also brought contemporary visibility to the ensemble while remaining consistent with Eggers' preference for performers capable of inhabiting historical and mythic worlds without modern anachronism. Willem Dafoe as Hamir the Fool. Willem Dafoe reprises his collaboration with Eggers. Following The Lighthouse as Hamir the Fool, the court jester who participates in the spiritual initiation of young Hamlet and later appears in a more spectral capacity. Dafoe's casting was deliberate. The role was written with him in mind. His capacity for physical transformation, eccentric intensity, and commitment to extreme performance styles made him ideal for a character who bridges the comic, the sacred, and the uncanny. The ritual scenes required an actor unafraid of animalistic movement and vocal extremes, qualities Defoe has demonstrated throughout a career that includes The Lighthouse, The Florida Project, At Eternity's Gate, and numerous other demanding roles. His presence adds a layer of ritualistic strangeness to the early sequences and reinforces the film's interest in the liminal spaces between the human and the supernatural. Björk as the Cirrus Björk's casting as the Cirrus marked her first significant film appearance since Dancer in the Dark more than 2 decades earlier. The role is brief but visually and thematically striking. Eggers connected with Björk through composer Robin Carolan and through the Icelandic writer Sjön, who co-wrote the screenplay and had a long personal relationship with the musician. The environment around the production felt familiar to her, which facilitated her participation. Björk contributed ideas to the character's appearance, including the covering of her eyes with cowrie shells drawn from archaeological evidence related to the cultural setting of that sequence. The result is a figure of pure mythic authority who delivers crucial prophecy to Amleth. Her casting injected a layer of contemporary artistic prestige and Icelandic cultural authenticity into the film, aligning with Eggers' commitment to historical and ethnographic detail. Her daughter, Isadora Bjarkadottir Barney, also appears in a smaller role, further embedding the production within Icelandic creative circles. Supporting an ensemble cast, the supporting cast was assembled with equal attention to physical presence, cultural fit, and the ability to inhabit a harsh, ritualistic world. Gustav Lind plays Thorir the Proud, Fjölnir's son and Amlet's cousin, bringing a younger generation of ambition and rivalry into the household. Elliot Rose appears as Gunnar, the younger son of Gudrún and Fjölnir. Ingvar Sigurdsson, also credited as Ingvar Eggert Sigurdsson, plays the He Witch, a figure of magic and counsel. Kate Dickie, previously seen in The Witch, appears as Haldora the Pict. Ralph Ineson, another Eggers collaborator from The Witch, plays Captain Volodymyr. Olwen Fuere portrays Ashildur Hofgithia. Hafthor Julius Bjornsson, known for Game of Thrones and Real World Strongman competition, appears as Thorfinnur Tooth Gnasher, contributing imposing physical scale to the berserker and warrior sequences. Additional performers include Phil Martin as Hallgrimr Half-Troll, Elder Scar as Finner the Nose Stub, Ian White as the Mound Dweller, Murray MacArthur as Hakon Ironbeard, and numerous others filling out the ranks of warriors, slaves, villagers, and ritual participants. The ensemble includes actors of Scandinavian, Icelandic, British, and other European backgrounds, supporting the film's effort to create a coherent cultural texture rather than a generic medieval fantasy. Physical types were carefully considered: tall, powerful builds for berserkers and warriors, more varied presence for the enslaved and domestic figures. Many performers underwent movement and combat training to ensure that fight sequences and ritual actions felt grounded and collective rather than individualized spectacle. Casting process and directorial approach. Robert Eggers' approach to casting reflected his broader method of historical immersion and precise control. He frequently writes with specific actors in mind once a working relationship is established. Anya Taylor-Joy and Willem Dafoe were clear examples. Nicole Kidman's role evolved toward her during the writing process. The collaboration with Sion brought Icelandic literary and cultural perspective into the script, which in turn influenced the search for performers who could embody that world without irony or distance. Casting director Carmel Cochran worked within this framework, assembling a company capable of sustaining the film's long takes, physical demands, and ethnographic detail. The production valued performers willing to endure difficult conditions. Much of the filming occurred in Ireland and related locations under challenging weather, with extensive uses of practical effects, mud, cold water, and prolonged outdoor sequences. Actors needed stamina, openness to physical transformation, and comfort with the director's highly planned, storyboarded approach that still left room for intense performance within strict visual parameters. Returning collaborators from The Witch and The Lighthouse, including Taylor-Joy, Dafoe, Dickey, and Innocent, provided a core of mutual understanding about Eggers' process. Newcomers such as Kidman, Hawke, Bang, and Björk integrated into that environment, bringing their own established methods while adapting to the specific demands of the Viking material. Physical and cultural authenticity in casting, a consistent priority was the avoidance of anachronistic or purely commercial casting choices that would undermine the film's commitment to historical texture. Scandinavian and Northern European performers were prominent in key roles. Skarsgård's Swedish background, Bang's Danish background, and the inclusion of Icelandic talent, Björk, Sigurdsson, and others, reinforced linguistic and physical plausibility. The use of actors with experience in physically demanding or period work reduced the need for extensive artificial adjustment. Berserker sequences and large scale battles required performers who could move convincingly in armor or minimal clothing under harsh conditions. The casting of real-world strongman Hafthor Julius Björnsson for a warrior role exemplifies the preference for authentic physical scale over purely cinematic illusion. Costume, hair, and makeup design worked in concert with casting. Linda Muir's costumes and the overall production design by Craig Lathrop created a visual world that the actors inhabited rather than merely performed within. The result is an ensemble that feels of a piece. Bodies shaped by the same imagined culture of raid, ritual, slavery, and blood feud. Thematic implications of the ensemble casting choices serve the film's central themes of fate, revenge, lineage, and the permeability between the human and the supernatural. Skarsgård's amulet is the axis around which these forces turn. Kidman's Gudrún complicates simple notions of maternal loyalty and victimhood. Bang's Fjölnir embodies the usurper who is himself subject to decline and the same codes that drive the hero. Taylor-Joy's Olga introduces an outsider perspective and a form of agency rooted in cunning rather than pure martial prowess. Defoe and Björk supply the ritual and prophetic dimensions that elevate the story beyond personal vendetta into mythic territory. Hawke's brief but potent presence as the murdered king establishes the emotional and spiritual debt that the rest of the film seeks to repay. Supporting players fill out a social world of hierarchy, violence, and survival. The presence of both established stars and lesser known or character actors creates a hierarchy of attention that mirrors the film's own social structure. The royal and prophetic figures command focus, while the mass of warriors, slaves, and retainers provides texture and scale. The decision to cast known collaborators alongside new high profile names balanced artistic continuity with broader commercial reach without sacrificing the film's singular tone. Preparation and collaboration dynamics. Many of the principal actors underwent significant preparation. Skarsgård Physical transformation and combat training were particularly intensive. Taylor-Joy and others engaged with the historical and ethnographic research that underpinned the production. Ritual sequences required coordination between performers, movement specialists, and the camera team under cinematographer Jarin Blaschke. The long take style demanded precise timing and physical endurance. Eggers' method of thorough pre-production and storyboarding meant that casting decisions were made with specific visual and kinetic requirements already in mind. The collaborative atmosphere around Icelandic contributors shone as co-writer. Björk's involvement and local talent helped root the project in a living cultural tradition rather than purely reconstructed scholarship. This influenced both the writing of certain roles and the comfort level of performers asked to inhabit shamanic or prophetic figures. Overall architecture of the cast of the Northman is structured as a carefully balanced ensemble rather than a simple star vehicle. Skarsgård provides the physical and narrative center. Kidman, Bang, Hawke, and Taylor-Joy form the primary dramatic circle around him. Dafoe and Bjork supply the uncanny and ritualistic poles. The larger supporting company creates a living social world of warriors, thralls, priests, and household members. Casting director Carmel Cochran, working under Eggers' exacting vision and with input from producer star Skarsgård, assembled a group capable of sustaining both intimate psychological confrontations and large scale sequences of violence and ceremony. Every major choice reflects a consistent set of priorities: historical and cultural plausibility, physical suitability for a harsh and ritualized world, proven ability to work within Agassiz' precise directorial style, and the capacity to embody characters shaped by fate, blood, and the supernatural. The result is an ensemble that feels both mythic and concrete, larger than life yet rooted in specific bodies, faces, and performances. The casting does not merely fill roles, it constructs the film's entire imaginative and emotional architecture. Production development and pre-production. The origins of the Northman stretch back across more than a decade of personal ambition, professional serendipity, and a shared fascination with one of history's most captivating civilizations. The film did not emerge overnight from a single conversation or a fleeting creative impulse. Instead, it was the product of two separate journeys, one undertaken by a Swedish born actor with deep roots in Norse heritage, and another by a meticulous American filmmaker whose entire artistic identity had been defined by his obsession with historical authenticity. Journeys that eventually converged to produce one of the most ambitious Viking films ever committed to celluloid. Alexander Skarsgård, born into a Swedish family with a heritage that made Norse mythology and Viking history feel less like historical curiosity and more like cultural birthright, had harbored a lifelong fascination with the world of the Vikings. Growing up immersed in Scandinavian culture, Skarsgård found himself drawn again and again to the legends, sagas, and mythological landscapes that defined the Viking Age. This was not a passing interest that arrived with stardom. It was a childhood passion that he carried with him throughout his career, waiting for the right moment and the right creative partner to bring it to life on screen. As early as 2011, Skarsgård had made concrete attempts to transform this passion into a film. That year, he was attached to an epic Viking project at Warner Bros., operating under the working title The Vanguard. The project generated considerable industry interest, but it ultimately failed to materialize, joining the long list of ambitious films that never make it from development to production. The collapse of that project did not diminish Skarsgård's desire; if anything, it deepened it. He continued working with producer Lars Knudsen, searching for the right combination of story, collaborator, and circumstances that would finally allow him to make the Viking film he had always envisioned. Meanwhile, Robert Eggers was charting his own path toward the Viking world, having established himself as one of the most distinctive voices in contemporary American cinema with The Witch 2015 and The Lighthouse 2019. Eggers had built a reputation for films that were both terrifying and strikingly original in their approach to historical period detail. His work was defined by an almost fanatical commitment to research and authenticity, a refusal to compromise on historical accuracy in favor of accessibility or commercial convenience. This quality, celebrated by critics and admired by cinephiles, also made him an unlikely candidate to helm a large scale Hollywood production. But a trip to Iceland in 2016, taken with his wife Alexandra Shaker, who is an enthusiast of Old Norse sagas, planted the seed that would eventually grow into the Northman. During that Iceland trip, Eggers had a meeting that would prove pivotal not just to the film, but to his entire creative trajectory. He was introduced to Björk, the iconic Icelandic musician and artist, who in turn introduced him to the celebrated Icelandic novelist and poet Sjón. This introduction was not merely a social pleasantry. It was the beginning of a creative partnership that would shape the entire intellectual and artistic architecture of the Northman. Sjón, a collaborator of Björk's with deep roots in Icelandic literature and a profound familiarity with Old Norse mythology and saga literature, would become Eggers' co-writer on the project, bringing a perspective and a depth of cultural knowledge that would prove invaluable to the film's authenticity. The meeting between Eggers and Skarsgård came in 2017 when the two sat down to discuss possible future collaborations. The conversation naturally turned to the subject of Viking Age cinema, and both men discovered in each other the ideal partner for the film they each independently wanted to make. Skarsgård brought the performer's passion and the producer's drive. Eggers brought the director's vision and the researcher's discipline. The creative collaboration was set in motion, and Eggers reached out to Sean to begin the long process of research and writing that would eventually produce the screenplay. The foundational source material for the film was the legend of Amleth as recorded by the 12th century Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus in his monumental work Gesta Danorum. The legend of Amleth is most widely known today as the direct inspiration for William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Indeed, many of the structural and thematic elements of Hamlet can be traced directly back to Saxo's account of Hamlet, including the murder of a king by his brother, the enforced remarriage of the king's wife, and the son's quest for vengeance. By returning to the pre Shakespearean, pre Renaissance source material, Eggers and Stone were stripping away centuries of artistic and cultural mediation to find the rawer, older, more mythological story beneath. But Eggers and Sean's research did not stop with Saxo Grammaticus. The screenplay drew on a vast body of Old Norse literature and mythology. Eggers specifically cited the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, the two foundational texts of Norse mythological literature, as central influences, along with a range of the Icelandic sagas, including Egil's saga, Grettir's saga, the Erbygja saga, and the saga of Rolfur Kraki. Each of these texts contributed something to the film's world building, its understandings of Viking social structures, its conception of heroism and fate, and its exploration of the porous boundary between the human and the supernatural in Viking Age cosmology. To ensure that this research was grounded not only in literary sources but also in the best available contemporary scholarship, Eggers assembled a team of distinguished academic consultants. Archaeologist Neil Price at Uppsala University, one of the world's foremost experts on Viking Age material culture and belief systems, served as a historical consultant on the film. Folklorist Terry Gunnell at the University of Iceland, a specialist in Old Norse folklore, performance, and ritual, also contributed his expertise. Viking historian Johanna Katrin Fredriksdottir rounded out the consultancy team. The involvement of these scholars was not merely cosmetic. Their knowledge shaped fundamental aspects of the film's portrayal of Viking ritual, religious practice, social hierarchy, and daily life. Eggers also acknowledged a perhaps surprising source of inspiration in the 1982 sword and sorcery classic Conan the Barbarian, directed by John Milius. The director described his ambition as something like making Conan the Barbarian in the manner of the great Russian filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky, a formulation that captured the tension at the heart of the project between visceral genre entertainment and demanding artistic seriousness. This unlikely pairing of references spoke to Eggers's determination to make a film that was both cinematically rigorous and genuinely exciting, that honored its scholarly research while delivering the kinetic primal energy of an epic action film. The casting process began in earnest in October 2019 when it was announced that Eggers would direct the project, co-writing with Sean. Alexander Skarsgård, Nicole Kidman, Anya Taylor-Joy, Bill Skarsgård, Alexander's brother, and Willem Dafoe were reported to be in talks to join the cast. By December 2019, these cast members had been confirmed, and Claes Bang, the Danish actor best known for his role in Ruben Östlund's The Square, was added to play the film's primary antagonist, Fjölnir the Brotherless. The film was officially in preparation by December 2019, with Belfast announced as the primary filming location in August 2020. As filming finally began after a significant pandemic related delay, additional cast members were announced. Björk, whose Icelandic connection to Eggers dated back to that pivotal 2016 meeting, joined the cast turn to play the seeress, a role that suited her otherworldly artistic persona perfectly. Her daughter, Isadora Doa Barney, also joined the film. Kate Dickie, the Scottish actress known for her work in Game of Thrones and The Witch, was cast as Haldora the Pict, a slave on Fjölnir's farm. Ethan Hawke was confirmed to play King Arvandil, War Raven Amle's doomed father. Additional supporting roles were filled by the Icelandic actor Ingvar Eggert Sigurdsson, the towering Ian White as the Mound Dweller, the legendary strongman Hafthor Julius Björnsson as Thorfinnur Tooth Gnasher, Taj Murphy, Ralph Ineson, and Olwen Fuere. One notable casting change occurred in September 2020 when Bill Skarsgård, who had been attached to play Thorir, Fjölnir's elder son, announced his withdrawal from the project due to scheduling conflicts. He was replaced by Swedish actor Gustav Lind, who ultimately delivered a compelling performance in the role. The departure of Bill Skarsgård, while potentially disruptive, did not appear to significantly impact the project's momentum, and Linda's casting proved an effective solution. Filming principal photography on the Northman had originally been scheduled to begin in March 2020, but the COVID-19 pandemic brought film productions around the world to an abrupt halt, and the Northman was among the casualties. The enforced hiatus lasted several months, delaying a production that had already involved years of development work. When filming finally did commence in August 2020, it did so under the complex health and safety protocols that had become the new normal for the global film industry. The primary filming location was Northern Ireland, which provided a rugged atmospheric landscape well suited to the film's Viking Age setting. The production ran for 87 days, wrapping in early December 2020, a substantial shoot that reflected both the scale of the material and the meticulous approach that Eggers brought to every aspect of the filmmaking process. The production design team undertook the extraordinary task of constructing authentic Viking Age environments from scratch. King Orvandale's village, the royal hill fort that opens the film and establishes The world into which Amleth is born was physically built at Torhead on the dramatic coastline of County Antrim. This remote, windswept location, with its spectacular views over the North Channel, provided the kind of primal elemental backdrop that Eggers's vision demanded. The construction of a convincing Viking Age fortification at this location was a significant undertaking, not a matter of dressing an existing structure, but of building one from the ground up, using materials, techniques, and architectural forms informed by archaeological research. Fjölnir's farm in Iceland. The isolated hardscrabble sheep farm to which the antagonist has been reduced after losing his throne was constructed at Knockdo near the town of Larne. This location, situated in a more enclosed and domestic landscape than Tor had, perfectly captured the diminished circumstances of a once powerful king forced into a life of agricultural labor. The contrast between these two constructed environments, the royal hill fort and the exile's farm, was itself a form of visual storytelling, conveying through space and architecture the arc of the narrative's power dynamics. The sequences set in the land of the Rus, the vast territories to the east, where the adult Amleth serves as a berserker Viking raider before his encounter with the Ceres sets him on the path of vengeance, were filmed at multiple locations across Northern Ireland. The forest edge banks of the River Bann provided one such setting. The Portglenone area contributed another. The Clandyboy Estate, a historic demesne in County Down, and the ruins of Shane's Castle on the shores of Lough Neagh also featured in these sequences. The variety of these locations, each contributing a different texture and atmosphere, allowed the film to suggest the geographic diversity of the Viking world without venturing too far from its Northern Irish base. Perhaps the most striking location choice was the one used for the film's climactic confrontation, the Gates of Hell, the volcanic landscape where Amleth and Fjölnir engage in their naked blade-wielding final duel, was in fact Hightown Quarry, located just outside Belfast. Through a combination of production design, cinematography, and likely some digital enhancement, this industrial quarry was transformed into a convincingly hellish volcanic landscape, a fitting setting for the film's cataclysmic conclusion. The choice of a quarry near Belfast as a stand in for an Icelandic volcano speaks to the ingenuity and pragmatism of the production, which had to balance creative ambition with the practical realities of an 87-day shoot. Some sequences were filmed further afield. Brief but important scenes were captured at Five Finger Strand, near Malin Head in County Donegal, the northernmost point of Ireland, where the landscape achieves a particular bleakness and grandeur. Iceland itself also contributed locations to the film. The Svinafellsjökull Glacier, with its vast otherworldly expanses of ancient ice, appeared in the film. The northern Icelandic town of Akureyri also featured in the production, bringing some authenticity of actual Icelandic landscape to a film otherwise primarily shot in Ireland. Throughout the production, cinematographer Jarin Blaschke, Eggers' longtime collaborator, who had shot both The Witch and The Lighthouse, worked to develop a visual language for the Northman that was simultaneously epic in scope and intimately grounded in the physical reality of the world the production had constructed. Blushki's photography emphasized natural light, dramatic atmospheric conditions, and a palette that shifted between the cold blues and grays of the Nordic landscape and the warm, flickering golds of firelight and torchlight. The result was imagery that felt historically authentic rather than artificially glossy, reinforcing the film's commitment to bringing the Viking world to life on its own terms. Post production, if the development and filming of The Northman were marked by ambitious creative vision and the practical challenges of a large scale period production. The post production phase brought its own set of difficult, sometimes painful negotiations between the film that Eggers had envisioned and the film that could realistically be released to a mainstream audience. The editing process, overseen by editor Louise Ford, proved to be the most challenging phase of the entire production for Eggers. By his own account, the director found the editing of The Northman more difficult than anything he had previously encountered in his filmmaking career. The task of shaping 87 days of footage, shot across multiple locations in Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and Iceland, into a coherent, dramatically effective narrative of manageable length required constant creative decision making of the most demanding kind. Test screenings, a standard part of the Hollywood post production process, provided crucial and sometimes uncomfortable feedback. Audience responses to early cuts of the film indicated that the first act, which established the film's Viking Age world, introduced the young Hamlet, and set in motion the central revenge narrative, was moving too slowly for general audiences. This was a familiar challenge for Eggers, whose films had always prioritized atmosphere, detail, and a particular quality of unhurried immersiveness. But the scale of The Northman, both in terms of its budget and its intended audience, meant that these test screening responses could not simply be ignored. More significant and ultimately more consequential for the film's final form was audience feedback about the film's dialogue. A substantial portion of the dialogue in earlier cuts of The Northman was delivered in Old Norse, the language actually spoken by Vikings during the film's ninth century setting. This represented another expression of Eggers' commitment to historical authenticity, the same impulse that had led him to use 17th century dialect in The Witch and to research the specific idioms of New England lighthouse keepers for The Lighthouse. However, test screening audiences found the Old Norse dialogue difficult to understand, and this difficulty was reported to be significantly affecting their engagement with the narrative. The decision to address this issue through automated dialogue replacement ADR sessions, essentially re-recording most of the Old Norse dialogue in English, was clearly not taken lightly. It represented a significant compromise of the film's original linguistic ambition, and it must have been particularly difficult for Eggers given how central historical authenticity was to his artistic identity. Nevertheless, the practical necessity of making the film accessible to a broader audience prevailed, and most of the Old Norse dialogue was replaced with English in these ADR sessions. This kind of negotiation between artistic vision and commercial viability was not unique to the Northman, but it took on particular significance in this case because of the scale of the production. Eggers had previously worked with budgets that, while significant for independent films, were a fraction of the 70 to $90 million that The Northman ultimately cost. The film was originally planned to cost around $65 million, but various factors pushed the final figure higher. Sources close to the production indicated the net cost after tax incentives was closer to $70 million. The larger the budget, the greater the pressure to appeal to a mainstream audience, and the more difficult it became to maintain the uncompromising artistic vision that had defined Eggers's earlier work. The final cut of the film received its formal approval on November 3, 2021, more than a year after principal photography had wrapped. This lengthy post production period reflected both the complexity of the editing challenge and the care taken over decisions that had significant implications for the film's ultimate character. During post production, a book documenting the film's production and research process was also planned, written by film critic Simon Abrams and director Eggers, and titled The Northman, A Call to the Gods. This 160-page volume was originally scheduled for release on September 6, 2022, before being pushed back to November 8, 2022. The existence of such a book speaks to the extraordinary depth of research and creative effort that went into the production, research that deserved a dedicated documentary record of its own. Music, the musical dimension of The Northman, was as carefully considered and as deeply researched as any other aspect of the production. Robert Eggers, understanding that the film's sonic world was as important as its visual world in creating the experience of Viking Age immersion, made an unconventional but inspired choice for composers. Robin Carolan and Sebastian Gainsborough, both former artists on the influential Triangle record label, known for experimental and avant-garde electronic music. Gainsborough records under the name Vessel, and like Carolan, he had built a reputation in underground music circles for sounds that were atmospheric, textured, and often unsettling in ways that resisted easy categorization. The choice of two experimental musicians, rather than traditional film composers with established orchestral sensibilities, to score a Viking Age epic was a bold decision, one that reflected Eggers' determination to approach every element of the film in a spirit of genuine inquiry and creative risk taking. The composing pair approached their task with the same commitment to historical research that characterized the rest of the production. They engaged extensively with the history of Viking music, a field that presents significant challenges since the actual sounds of Viking Age music are largely unrecoverable, requiring a process of informed reconstruction and imaginative extrapolation. They held discussions with ethnographer Paul Hexbro, drawing on his expertise in Nordic folk music traditions to inform their understanding of the instruments, tunings, and musical forms that would have characterized the Viking Age soundscape. From these discussions and their own extensive research, Carolan and Gainsborough developed an approach to the score that centered on instruments associated with Nordic folk music. The tagelharpa, a bow-played lyre with strings traditionally made from horsehair, known from Scandinavia archaeological finds, featured prominently in their sonic palette. The langspiel, an Icelandic instrument that functions as a kind of zither, contributed another characteristic sound. The Kravik lyre, another ancient stringed instrument of Nordic origin, was also incorporated. The sekpipa, a form of Nordic bagpipe, added a haunting, reedy texture to the mix. These authentic instruments were not simply deployed in conventional ways. Carolan and Gainsborough experimented with them, pushing them beyond their traditional sonic parameters to create sounds that were simultaneously rooted in historical authenticity and genuinely strange, otherworldly, and unsettling in ways appropriate to the film's dark mythological subject matter. This experimental approach to historical instruments, using them as raw material for something new rather than as museum pieces to be reproduced faithfully, was entirely in keeping with the film's broader creative philosophy. One of the most distinctive elements of the score was the use of a 40-member string ensemble to recreate the sound of the bullroarer, an ancient instrument found in cultures around the world, consisting of a flat piece of wood or bone attached to a cord and whirled through the air to produce a roaring, pulsating sound. The bullroarer is one of the world's oldest known instruments, and its use in the score connected the film's sonic world to a pre-Viking, prehistoric depth of human musical experience. Having a 40-piece string section mimic this archaic sonic effect was both an ingenious solution to a practical challenge and a conceptually rich decision, layering modern orchestral resources with ancient instrumental traditions. The score album was released digitally by Backlot Music on April 15, 2022, a week before the film's wide US release, and contained 43 tracks, providing a comprehensive overview of the film's musical landscape. On July 1, 2022, Sacred Bones Records, an independent label associated with experimental and alternative music, released the album in physical formats, including CD, vinyl, and cassette. The choice of Sacred Bones for the physical release was itself a statement about the music's character and its intended audience. This was music that belonged in the world of adventurous listening as much as it belonged in the multiplex. The score received recognition from the International Film Music Critics Association, which nominated it for Best Original Score for an action adventure film at their 2022 awards, a nomination that acknowledged the achievement of Carolan and Gainsborough in creating something genuinely distinctive and accomplished within the genre. Release theatrical. The path to the theatrical release of The Northman was not without its complications. The film was originally scheduled to open on April 8, 2022, but Focus Features, which was distributing the film in the United States, pushed the date back to April 22, 2022. Universal Pictures handled the international distribution. This 2 week shift in release date may seem minor, but in the competitive landscape of theatrical exhibition, scheduling decisions of this kind can have significant implications for a film's box office fortunes. Before the wide release, the film was given a series of high profile special screenings in cities across Europe, serving simultaneously as promotional events and opportunities to generate critical and audience buzz ahead of the general release. In Stockholm, the Rigoletto Cinema hosted a special screening on March 28, giving Scandinavian audiences, perhaps the most naturally predisposed audience for a Viking epic, an early look at the film. Hamburg's Astor Film Lounge hosted a screening on March 30. The Cinema Troisi in Rome held a special preview on April 1. London's prestigious Odeon Lux Leicester Square, one of the premier venues for major film premieres in the UK, hosted a screening on April 5, and Belfast, one of the primary filming locations for the movie, hosted its own special preview at Cineworld on April 6. These screenings were not merely logistical exercises. They were carefully orchestrated events with Alexander Skarsgård and Robert Eggers attending several of them in person, building the kind of face to face engagement with press and audiences that remains, despite the dominance of digital marketing, an important component of a film's promotional campaign. The world premiere of The Northman took place on April 18, 2022, at the TCL Chinese Theater, more commonly known as Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, one of the most historically significant cinema venues in the world and a fitting location for the premiere of a film with epic ambitions. The premiere attracted considerable celebrity attention. Notably, Nicole Kidman and Anya Taylor-Joy were widely reported to have had an enthusiastic personal reunion at the event, with the two actresses publicly expressing admiration for each other. Wide releases in some countries began ahead of the US release date. On April 13, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, the Scandinavian markets where Viking heritage is most immediately felt as a living cultural presence, received the film in wide release. On April 14, a further wave of territories, including the Czech Republic, Ecuador, Iceland, Mexico, Montenegro, the Netherlands, Serbia, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Uruguay, received the film. The United Kingdom and Lithuania got wide releases on April 15. The United States followed on April 22nd. The advertising campaign for the Northman generated its own moment of viral cultural attention before the film had even opened. Focus Features commissioned a series of promotional posters for the New York City subway system that conspicuously did not include the film's title. These mysterious title free images of Viking imagery generated significant online discussion and media coverage within days. As New Yorkers speculated about what film the posters were advertising, and content creators produced entertaining videos of subway riders guessing the plot. The campaign became a minor viral moment, generating the kind of free media attention and audience engagement that marketing teams dream of. Within a day of going viral, the title free approach had become a widely discussed marketing tactic. A 160-page companion book, The Northman, A Call to the Gods, written by film critic Simon Abrams with contributions from was planned to accompany the film's release. Originally scheduled to arrive on September 6, 2022, it was later rescheduled to November 8, 2022. The book documented the film's extensive production, research, and creative process, serving as both a record of the film's making and a piece of cultural scholarship in its own right. Home media, despite the theatrical release's disappointing box office performance, a matter that will be examined in detail in the reception section. The Northman found a significantly warmer reception and a more commercially successful second life in the home media and board markets. The film became available for premium video on demand rental on May 13, 2022, just 3 weeks after its US theatrical debut, reflecting the compressed theatrical window that had become standard in the post pandemic entertainment landscape, and about which Eggers himself expressed ambivalence. Digital purchase options followed on June 6, 2022. Physical media, Blu ray, DVD, and Ultra HD Blu ray were all released on June 7, 2022, distributed by Universal Pictures Home Entertainment in the United States. The transition to what produced results that the theatrical run had not. In its debut weekend on premium video on demand, the film ranked as the top rented title on iTunes, third on Vudu, and fourth on Google Play. The revenue generated in this PVOD debut weekend was comparable to what bigger theatrical performers like The Bad Guys and The Lost City were earning on the same platforms, despite The Northman having grossed considerably less than both of those films during their theatrical runs. Industry observers noted this disparity with interest, suggesting that the Northman's theatrical exposure, even at a commercially disappointing level, had effectively seeded audience awareness that was then converted into home media consumption. IndieWire observed that the film appeared to be the kind of work that was substantially elevated even by relatively modest theatrical exposure. The following week, the film continued to perform solidly on VOD platforms, finishing third on both iTunes and Vudu and fifth on Google Play, a holding pattern that indicated sustained demand rather than a one weekend curiosity spike. When the physical media release arrived in early June, it immediately demonstrated the film's appeal to home video collectors and cinephiles. In its debut week on the DVD and Blu-ray market, covering the period ending June 11, 2022, The Northman debuted at number 1 on the NPD Videoscan First Alert chart, which tracks combined DVD and Blu-ray disc unit sales across the US market. It simultaneously topped the Blu-ray disc sales chart for the same week, knocking previous chart toppers, including The Batman, off the top position. These were not minor distinctions, topping both the combined disc sales chart and the Blu-ray chart in the same week indicated a substantial consumer appetite for the film in its physical media form. The home media success proved financially meaningful. By September 2023 deadline, Hollywood reported that The Northman had approached break-even status, a reversal of theatrical fortune achieved primarily through its strong performance on premium VOD. Focus features President of Production and Acquisitions Kiska Higgs described the outcome as acceptable for the company, while noting that production costs had been shared with New Regency and that Focus Features had not been the primary production entity. The financial salvage operation mounted by the film's VOD and home media performance was not a complete transformation of its economic profile, but it significantly softened the blow of its theatrical underperformance and suggested a film that had found its audience, even if that audience encountered it primarily at home rather than in a theater. Reception box office The box office performance of The Northman was, by any conventional measure, a disappointment, a fact that generated significant industry discussion and personal reflection from Robert Eggers himself. Against a production budget of $70 million or 70 or 90 million, depending on the source and methodology used, the film grossed a worldwide total of approximately $69.6 million, according to the numbers, or $75, 8 million according to Box Office Mojo, a discrepancy that reflects different methodological approaches to tracking international grosses, but that in either case represents a theatrical run that fell short of profitability. In the United States and Canada, The Northman was released on April 22nd, 2022, opening alongside two other films that were in some respects targeting similar demographics: The Bad Guys, an animated film with family appeal, and The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, a self-referential action comedy starring Nicolas Cage. Industry projections ahead of the opening weekend had estimated that The Northman would gross somewhere between $8 million and $15 million from its opening across 223 theaters, a wide range that reflected genuine uncertainty about the film's commercial appeal. On its first day of release, the film earned $5 million, including $1.4 million from Thursday night previews. These are reasonable figures for a non franchise adult drama, but they signaled that the film was trending toward the lower end of projections rather than the higher. The opening weekend gross of $12 3 million placed the film fourth at the domestic box office, behind Sonic the Hedgehog 2, The Bad Guys, and Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. While a $12.3 million opening for a serious R-rated period epic was not disgraceful, it fell short of what a film with a $70 million budget ideally needed to establish a viable theatrical run. Deadline Hollywood analyzed the competitive dynamics of that opening weekend and noted that The Northman and The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent appeared to be drawing from the same pool of adult male moviegoers, effectively splitting a demographic that would have been more beneficial if concentrated on a single title. This kind of release schedule competition, where films target the same audience simultaneously, is a recognized hazard in the theatrical marketplace, and it may have contributed to both films underperforming relative to their individual potential. The subsequent weeks of the theatrical run followed a pattern of steady but steep decline. In the second weekend, the film earned $6.4 million, finishing fourth, a respectable hold that indicated the film had genuine word of mouth appeal, but not strong enough to suggest a breakout. The third weekend brought $2.9 million and a sixth place finish. By the fourth weekend, the film had earned $1.75 million for seventh place, and by its fifth weekend, it had dropped to 10th place with $1.1 million. In its sixth weekend, the Northman effectively exited the top 10, earning just $249,660, a figure that indicated its theatrical run was substantially concluded. The international performance followed a parallel trajectory. Opening in 15 markets in its first weekend, the film earned $3, 4 million internationally, a modest start that reflected both the limited initial rollout and the challenges of marketing a serious Viking epic to diverse global audiences. As the film expanded to 41 markets in its second international weekend, it earned $6.3 million, suggesting stronger per theater performance as it reached more of its natural audience. Subsequent international weekends produced $4.5 million, $2, 2 million, $2.5 million, $2.9 million, and $1.4 million in successive frames. The domestic total of approximately $34.2 million, combined with the international total of approximately $35.4 million, produced the worldwide gross of roughly $69.6 million, a figure that, measured against a production budget of $70 million and the additional tens of millions spent on marketing and distribution represented a significant shortfall. Robert Eggers addressed the box office disappointment directly in public statements following the theatrical run. He acknowledged that the film had met the expectations of a bad marketplace, a formulation that gestured toward the broader structural challenges facing non franchise adult cinema in the post pandemic theatrical landscape. He also expressed ambivalence about the compressed theatrical window. Am I disappointed that 3 to 4 weeks in, we're on board because that's the way things are done in the post COVID world? Yeah, but it's doing great on board. So there you go. The director's tone was one of pragmatic acceptance rather than bitterness, a recognition that the commercial realities of contemporary cinema had intersected with his film in ways that were not entirely within his control. The Weird performance, as documented above, ultimately served to partially redeem the film's economic situation, bringing it to near break-even status through a sustained period of strong home entertainment performance. By September 2023 deadline, Hollywood was reporting this relatively positive outcome, suggesting that the Northman had, over the course of its full release cycle, managed to recover a large portion of its theatrical losses through alternative distribution channels. Critical response: if the box office performance of The Northman was a disappointment, the critical reception was emphatically the opposite. The film was met with widespread critical acclaim that placed it among the most praised films of 2022 and firmly established Robert Eggers as one of the most accomplished directors working in American cinema. On Rotten Tomatoes, the leading review aggregation site, The Northman achieved a 90% approval rating based on reviews from 372 critics, with an average rating of 7.7 out of 10. This is an exceptionally high score for a film of this kind, a period epic with graphic violence and a demanding artistic sensibility, and it indicated near consensus among professional critics that the film represented a significant achievement. The website's critical consensus captured the prevailing view concisely and accurately. The film was described as a bloody revenge epic and breathtaking visual marvel that found filmmaker Robert Eggers expanding his scope without sacrificing any of his signature style. This formulation, the idea that Eggers had successfully scaled up his approach without compromising its essential character, would prove to be a central theme of much of the critical discourse around the film. On Metacritic, which uses a weighted average score to aggregate critical opinion, The Northman received a score of 82 out of 100 based on reviews from 60 critics. Metacritic describes scores in this range as indicating universal acclaim, a designation that relatively few films achieve, and that placed The Northman among the very best reviewed films of its year. Audience responses, as measured by industry tracking services, were more mixed. CinemaScore which surveys moviegoers on opening night to gauge immediate audience satisfaction, gave the film a grade of B on its A plus to F scale, a solid but not exceptional score that suggested the film's demands on its audience were not always met with enthusiasm by general moviegoers. Post Track, another audience tracking service, gave the film a 75% positive score, with 56% of respondents saying they would definitely recommend the film. These audience figures, while respectable, were considerably more moderate than the critical scores, suggesting a gap between the film's reception among professional critics and its reception among general moviegoers, a gap that is not uncommon with ambitious, challenging art films, but that also helps explain the theatrical box office underperformance. Among individual critical responses, the film attracted some of the most enthusiastic writing of any film released in 2022. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian awarded the film 5 stars, praising its nihilistic tone and the performances of the ensemble cast. Bradshaw was particularly struck by the film's visual audacity and its willingness to fully inhabit a morally and cosmologically alien worldview, describing it as entirely outrageous, with some epic visions of the flaring cosmos and declaring that he couldn't look away. The 5 star rating from a critic of Bradshaw's standing and from a publication of The Guardian's cultural authority was a significant endorsement. Gabriella Geisinger of Digital Spy also awarded 5 stars, praising Eggers' visionary direction and the film's grisly, surreal atmosphere. Geisinger's review was notable for its emphasis on the totality of the film's worldbuilding, characterizing the Viking universe that Eggers had constructed as so totally absorbing that it constituted a complete and convincing alternative reality. David Ehrlich of IndieWire, one of the most respected film critics working in the United States, responded with characteristic vividness, describing the film as primal, sinewy, gnarly as fuck, grab you by the throat intense, and never dull. Ehrlich's enthusiasm was unqualified, and his review helped establish the terms in which much subsequent critical discussion of the film would be conducted. Matt Matum of Total Film gave the film 5 stars and called it a truly distinctive, unmissable epic. Clarice Loffrey of The Independent also awarded 5 stars, describing the film as a beautiful risk, a phrase that acknowledged both the audacity of the creative undertaking and the very real possibility that it could have failed. Richard Whittaker of the Austin Chronicle called the film an extraordinary feat of cinema, singling out the direction for particular commendation. A.O. Scott of the New York Times, one of the most influential critics in American film culture, wrote a thoughtful, engaged review that praised the film's world building and the extraordinary care of its cinematography. Scott's central observation was about Eggers's fastidious, fanatical rendering of the Viking world in all its material detail, from the grand architecture of the hill fort down to the specifics of bed linens and cooking utensils. This attention to material culture, to the texture and substance of everyday life in a historical period, was, Scott argued, the foundation on which the film's larger emotional and mythological ambitions rested. Roger Ebert, Combs' Robert Daniels offered a somewhat more measured assessment, awarding 3 out of 4 stars. Daniels praised the direction, cinematography, and cast performances, but found that the film often stumbles when it searches for profundity. A critique that acknowledged the film's extraordinary craftsmanship while questioning whether its philosophical ambitions were always fully realized. Not all critical responses were positive. Richard Brody of The New Yorker, a critic known for his stringent standards and his allegiance to a particular tradition of cinematic artistry, was distinctly critical, finding that the film offers no synesthesia, no evocation of any sense beside vision, and concluding that it merely serves up its raw material, both half baked and overcooked. This was a minority view among professional critics, but it was expressed with characteristic sharpness, and it touched on a genuine tension in the film between its visual accomplishment and its narrative and emotional depth. K. Austin Collins of Rolling Stone offered a nuanced, mixed positive assessment. Collins found the film an off-stunning visual feast, but added that it served as an instructive example of how the most visionary intentions can't always enliven an otherwise rote story. This reading, which acknowledged the film's visual mastery while questioning whether its narrative was sufficient to sustain the emotional investment that the visual grandeur demanded, represented another version of the qualified enthusiasm that characterized a significant portion of the critical response. Christopher House, writing in The Spectator, commended the film's commitment to material authenticity but expressed reservations about the relentlessness of its violence. His overall assessment suggested that the film might paradoxically have benefited from being longer, with less emphasis on action, a somewhat counterintuitive view that nonetheless pointed to real questions about the balance between the film's contemplative and kinetic impulses. Movie Zine's Alexander Cardolo gave a 4 out of 5 assessment, singling out Skarsgård's physical and emotional performance as a particular highlight, along with Eggers's direction, a view shared by many critics who found the lead performance central to the film's impact. Beyond the immediate critical response, the Northman accumulated significant long term critical recognition. In December 2024, Collider ranked the film at number 7 on its list of the 10 best fantasy films of the 2020s, with critic Robert Lee III noting that the film exemplified how fantasy cinema could be brutal and striking rather than colorful and family friendly, using its violence purposefully to create a sense of mythological realism that treated the Amleth story as a sort of powerful mythos to be passed down across generations of Viking warriors. The film also received recognition from numerous awards organizations. The Hollywood Critics Association nominated it for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Supporting Actress at their mid-season film awards. The Saturn Awards nominated it for Best Thriller Film. The Chicago Film Critics Association recognized its costume design. The Dublin Film Critics Circle nominated it for Best Director and Best Cinematography. The Seattle Film Critics Society acknowledged its action, choreography, costume design, and production design. The International Film Music Critics Association nominated Robin Carolan and Sebastian Gainsborough's score for Best Original Score for an action lush adventure film. The Critics' Choice Super Awards nominated it for Best Science Fiction Fantasy Movie and Best Actor in a Science Fiction Fantasy Movie. These nominations, while not translating into the major awards recognition that might have accompanied a different box office trajectory, nonetheless demonstrated the breadth of the film's critical appreciation across different facets of filmmaking craft. The nominations spanned direction, performance, costume, production design, action choreography, music, and genre achievement. Evidence that the Northman was recognized as a multi-dimensional achievement rather than a film that excelled only in one or two areas. The cumulative picture painted by the critical response to The Northman is of a film that was recognized almost immediately as something exceptional, a work of genuine artistic ambition that had been realized with unusual skill and commitment. The film's place within the cinema of the 2020s seems secure. A dark, demanding, visually extraordinary period epic that honored both the scholarly rigor of its research and the primal mythological energy of its source material, delivered by a filmmaker of rare commitment to his vision and a cast performing at the top of their considerable abilities. The story of the Northman, from its origins in a Swedish actor's childhood fascination with Norse mythology, through the years of development, the pandemic complicated shoot across Irish and Icelandic landscapes, the difficult editing process, the compromise over language, the striking musical innovation, the viral marketing moment, the disappointing theaters, the word redemption, and the near unanimous critical acclaim is itself a kind of saga. It is the story of what happens when artists of genuine ambition attempt to make something uncompromising within the structures and constraints of contemporary commercial filmmaking, of the negotiations and sacrifices that entails, and of the possibility, despite everything, of producing work that endures beyond the opening weekend and finds its audience in time.